more on voice, and now we focus on voice as a managed service and some of the solutions that could come to the fore. Andy, I'd like to start off with you. Let's take a look at managed voice services and the fact that there's a notion that it's traditionally really been tied in with what multinational companies need. We know that this is changing rapidly, and smaller companies on the ground are starting to look at it as a solution for their business.
Well, a good example, and Angus touched on this earlier, a good example is the hosted PABX. So historically, organisations, small, medium and large, have had a PABX of some sort, a box in their office that they manage their fixed line call transactions through. Now with a hosted service that can be taken up into the cloud or managed centrally, where organisations don't have to spend the capital expenditure to have a hosted service. They can, it can be outsourced up into the cloud, and all of the services around that hosted PABX are managed. So, and this is not the only example. There are many others, but there is a move away from organisations having to lay out the money themselves, and hosted organisations that offer the services will do this for them.
Okay, give us an example, Val, of what we could be looking at in terms of future growth within the space.
You know, there's multiple, service providers together with vendors are building hosted services. Hosted collaboration services, which includes voice. So, voice is the most basic service that will be provided. But on top of that, you overlay things like presence, instant messaging, etc. So it's all about bundling of services. So one price for multiple services in a single bundle is where the business is going to go to. And hosting of those collaboration services and the bringing together of the infrastructure to provide a single service is where we're going to get.
You gave me a very good example off air with regards to walking into a building and connecting to the service within the building, and then making free phone calls, sending free text messages. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah, it's currently available. It's right now. The possibility is there for you to walk into an environment, connect wirelessly into that environment, and within that single environment, in the borders of that environment, you can make free calls to the people that work within that environment. So there is free call availability within a campus, within a building, or within a set area that's been dictated in that wireless space. So that kind of service is available right now. You also have things like single number mobility. So you can have your landline together with your mobile call, and you can decide which number it is you want to receive calls on. So you're accessible anywhere at any time.
Okay, so tell us what the consumer needs are right now, and how much of a demand are we getting for this kind of one service for all?
I think what we're finding in South Africa, as is often said, we lag a few years behind the rest of the world. So if you just look at voice over IP as a concept, where the ability to move the voice onto the IP platform, we're probably 4 to 5 years behind the trends in say Europe or the US. But that said, South African companies often become early adopters when they get, and so we see a few companies that are streets ahead. What we do need to see is that moving out more broadly into the market. And I think for consumers, certainly there are some interesting opportunities out there. But I think the real opportunity for this kind of new way of looking at voice is in the enterprise space, in the business space.
Is corporate South Africa requesting this kind of service from Neotel at this stage?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we certainly find that the interest is in the whole convergence model. There's a small barrier that people have to get over to understand that you need to move your entire company into the IP space. Once you're over that barrier, a whole lot of things come right. So the ability to really reduce the overheads in the company of managing separate data and voice networks. In that world, then you can connect to the rest of the world using IP. And so we offer what we call a SIP trunk, which is basically the standard protocol for connecting an IP-based voice solution. But over the top of that, we can do all of these kind of things in the background. So it's not just hosted voice services such as PBXs that are possible. We have some very sophisticated services such as a hosted contact center. So instead of a contact center operator having to go and do a whole lot of software development and build a whole lot of systems and deploy a whole lot of physical equipment, literally we sell a contact center as a service. So all you need is a screen and a telephone. and that makes a contact center.
And
it
a lot
can
of
be anywhere.
trust in your provider.
Absolutely.
Okay, Andy, what has your experience been?
Well, I think the key and voice over internet protocol has been mentioned quite a lot.
Yes.
The key is there are trends to reduce the cost of communication for the consumers in South Africa. That's the key. Now, voice over internet protocol has taken over the old least cost routing, the SIM-based least cost routing, and it takes a voice, digitizes it, puts it over a data line and sends it out the other end. The incredible thing is that the corporate VoIP now is as good in quality as a fixed line phone call. I mean, and that's really because one has the idea that a VoIP call is Skype. It has all sorts of echoes and it drops. The on-campus calling that Val was talking about, it is available right now, where you can offer corporates, you can say to them, rather than people within the building making very expensive calls from their cell phone, as they walk in from the road into the building, as soon as they get into the Wi-Fi environment, the calls are within the campus and they're all free. So for organizations, they can save extraordinary amounts of money from this.
What has the uptake been by corporate South Africa with regards to this? I'm sure the big banks, the financial institutions have deployed this kind of infrastructure.
The interest is really only starting around about now. But as Angus said, customers are looking for a converged solution. They're looking for a communication solution. The market has moved from a box drop type environment to a converged solution offering, where companies are saying, we want one person to take care of all of our communication needs. And that's really where the big organizations are making.
Okay, so Val, Angus spoke about contact centers and call centers. What's the feasibility when it comes to the African continent?
Personal opinion, I think it's very feasible. I think, in fact, it's probably one of the mechanisms we could use to leapfrog technology infrastructure rollouts to be able to provide those services. So instead of everyone trying to roll out everything, you get a few service providers being able to roll it out. That's the way it's going to be. It's the way it's going to go. More and more people, even corporates, want to pay on a per user basis. In a multi-tenancy secure way. So it's a very feasible opportunity, and just from some of the customers that we've been talking to across the African continent, huge interest in it, wanting to go into that environment.
What about Africa as an outsource destination versus the likes of, say, India, for example? Is that a probability, or is that looking years and years ahead?
I think it's looking years ahead. I think we've still got some of the basics to get right. I do believe we need to build on some of the skills, etc., to get to that point. But the opportunity is there, and it's up to us whether or not we want to take it.
That said, I think South Africa is looking a lot more attractive. Yeah. I think that some years back there was a lot of talk about South Africa being a very big business process outsourcing destination. And frankly, one of our big problems has always been the underlying cost of communication. Today, when we have contact centers wanting to locate in South Africa, there's some very big ones that have been are deployed here, and certainly more looking. We're seeing that they're now seeing world-class services on offer. So the kind of thing that I've spoken about with hosted contact centers.
So the only challenge right now is the cost, essentially.
Well, again, there are multiple costs, but I think, again, from Neotel's perspective, we certainly believe that we've made a big dent in that, and we can offer very feature-rich offerings to contact center operators, particularly because of the fact that we have global reach. So through Tata Communications, we have global reach, so we can offer inbound, outbound. We have something called local number services, where we can give South African numbers for global operators of call centers. We have that kind of service we can offer to South African companies that want to offer numbers in another country, for example, if they're operating multinationally themselves. So the whole call center industry in South Africa is starting to move into that global way of operating, and away from the strict per minute model that we used to have on ordinary telephone calls.
So Andy's sitting very quietly here.
Tell us yours.
Yeah, you're a very quiet chap. With regards to Africa, as possibly, how viable is it that it could be an outsource destination?
There's some pockets of excellence in Africa, and in terms of technological development, Kenya, for example, is a very good example. Their infrastructure, their data download capabilities are fantastic. They have lots of bandwidth. One of the restrictions we have in South Africa is the bandwidth, which is quickly fixing itself. We've plugged in the undersea cables, so that's great. That's linking up with an ever-improving terrestrial network. So we're getting the bandwidth, and it's improving all the time. But in other markets, and India's a good example, they have ubiquitous bandwidth. It's fast, it's available, it's everywhere, so that the speeds and availability and price is much lower.
You were saying that it's quickly fixing itself. When do you think it's going to fix itself entirely?
I think it'll take a few years, to be honest. I mean, there's some great infrastructural investment going on at the moment. My friend here is a good example.
I love the way that when I ask for timelines, I never really get an answer. Commit yourself to, when you're saying in a few years, are we looking at 2 years, are we looking at 3 years, are we looking at 5 or 10?
I would say 3 to 5 years.
Okay, so that's not too far away.
I don't think it's too far away.
I think it's interesting, and again, just to kind of draw the comparisons, I mean, there's no doubt that in the consumer space, consumers are increasingly using clever applications and other things to do voice. What we find interesting is how some of those concepts are moving across into the enterprise space. Yeah. So I'll just give you a simple example. In the same way as, for example, people operate within social networks in the consumer space, if you look at voice, the same kind of concepts are starting to happen in the voice space. So we know that companies already look at, for example, having corporate voice networks maybe hosted where essentially it's not really costing them to make calls within the company. We're now starting to see federations of organizations. So the whole idea that within industries, within sectors, say within government, or perhaps within a certain sector, those federations of users start to realize that they can communicate amongst each other. And this is where the challenge is for service providers, is to enable that federation to start communicating with each other efficiently, more cost effectively, and also, you know, all of the value adds that you can start talk about within that space.
Okay, but it's quite fascinating, because the only thing that's sort of ringing in my mind is profitability. Where are margins going to go for a lot of these telecoms companies? Is this kind of scenario sustainable?
I think margins in certain aspects are going to decrease. But I think, again, if service providers start building on services, start adding to their portfolio of services, they will find other areas to increase margins.
Yeah. Fantastic. We are almost out of time. Andy, last thoughts?
I think that's exactly the point. Operators, service providers are going to need to bundle more services, add more value to consumers and businesses, and that's really going to be the battleground in the next year or two.
Angus,
in summary, add value to the services that are being delivered, that sustains the top line, and maintain cost savings in the actual operations. So telcos need to be lean, they also need to be smart. And
mean, yes. And Val, last comments from you.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with my colleagues. I think it's important that the quality of the service is important. Laying it on top of the correct infrastructure is critical. And having cost-effective services to the consumer.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to all of you. We have to leave it there. Much appreciated for your time and for your insights today. Big thank you to Angus Hay, CTO at Neotel, Andy Baker, the CEO of the Nashua Group, and Val Moodley, Regional Manager of Data Center and Virtualization at Cisco South Africa. Well, that's all we have for you for this month's edition of Telco Talk. Until next month, from me, Eleni Giokos, it's goodbye.